Okay, hello folks. I'm Richard and I'm here with Ian Daniels, who is the director of a UK-based customer experience and digital technology marketing agency. He's up in Edinburgh and I'm going to be asking him a few questions about his usage of Forecast Forge with his company and clients. So, hello Ian, can you tell us a bit about yourself and who you work for and what it is that you do?
Hi, Richard. Yeah, so as you said, I'm based up in Edinburgh, but I have a team of consultants spread out across the UK. A lot of our work is focused around the Adobe Experience Cloud and implementation and integration of the products within that, primarily around the kind of analytics cloud. So Adobe launched their Tag Manager and Adobe Analytics. Adobe Target, Audience Manager, their DMP. So a lot of data focused products, and we also do a lot of marketing automation. So working with Adobe Campaign, to help clients with their external communications. And as you know, we often get involved in helping Adobe in pre-sales engagements, and that's where Forecast Forge and my usage of your very helpful tool came into play. As often, as I'm sure many people will be aware, clients want to know the return on investment, especially if they're going to be putting large chunks of cash into enterprise technology. And Forecast Forge is a really quick way to help them figure out what that could look like and help give them confidence that the program of work they're looking investing in is right for them, and understand the kind of results that they're going to see as they roll out these platforms.
So that's kind of like you have a very good understanding of what sort of percentage uplift the Adobe technology will give them, and the forecast helps understand the baseline performance of that website or client or whoever it is you're working with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of really specific use cases. So where a client has, a pretty well established paid media a channel in activity that drives a lot of their revenue, but aren't necessarily adding all of the behavioral data points that one might want to share from their webs and apps into the bidding and modeling of the paid media that they're doing, and actually, Adobe's offering in that space, Ad Cloud, is pretty well documented when you join up analytics. How much that improves the performance of the models there. So certainly for the instance that we first used Forecast Forge was an existing Adobe Ad Cloud customer. They're using Ad Cloud for search. Their portfolio of campaigns was doing really well. They'd been using it for about a year, and they were reaching a maturity level of starting to look at what's next and wanting to look at what the investment into analytics would bring. So in that scenario, it's really straightforward, as there are dozens of clients that are in that position, and Adobe can give pretty reliable percentage uplifts. I mean, they even on their public-facing marketing collateral state, I think it's between sort of 13 and 18% incremental uplift by adding these 2,000 additional data points into the efficient frontier model that powers the Adobe Ad Cloud. So for that client, that is pretty much a guaranteed uplift, which gives us a really good place to start from. But of course, we need to take that initial baseline. We need to understand where their traffic and sales are currently at, and try and help them model what that uplift could look like.
Yeah,
And rather
to
than
say like it's 30% of what?
yes, exactly,
13.
exactly.
Was it 30 or was it 13?
13, between 13 and 18%, but
Yeah, that sounds more reasonable.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, 13%. But I mean, yeah, one of the similar sort of business model clients, but in the travel space, that was one of the most recent examples that I'd seen myself with my own eyes, and they saw a 20% uplift by adding the analytics into the Ad Cloud modeling, and so I was relatively confident they would see enough of an uplift that that would validate their investment. But as I said, the CEO was very keen to to see some numbers around this, as you would be. And the other variable that we had at play in this instance was that it was coming to the end of Adobe's financial year, and they were putting a really good offer on the table for this customer, but it was time limited. So we really needed to to get the buy-in and to help speed up the decision-making process. So we didn't have the couple of weeks to manually put together some kind of ROI calculations and do all the kind of heavy lifting that we might have done in the past. Hence, reaching out to Forecast Forge and saying, "Hey, I have a use case."
God, if I'd known it was urgent, I could have given you a special price.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if we can talk a little bit more about that forecast that you were making. So it was with a website called Really Moving, as I understand it, and they're in kind of real estate buying and selling houses.
Yeah, so they're a very long established business. They've been around since the mid 90s. They help customers that are looking at that sort of conveyancing, surveyors, and then the cost of removals. They have a panel of partners, and they essentially help people that are searching for those services to figure out what's the best route, to get some prices and to compare different providers in their area, and then to go on and pick a partner to work with. So essentially, they're an aggregator working on a cost per lead basis. That's their business model, so their ability to scale is only limited by the sort of demand in the market, as it were. So it's quite an interesting business model to apply something like paid media and the optimization of paid media to, because they're not constrained by anything other than the demand in the market. So the interesting first step is that they've got a marketing director that's very much an advocate of enterprise analytics. She's worked with Adobe before. She's founded the AdCloud technology, which really helped. And then that first stage of commitment that's needed is to provide historic data, and they were really good at giving decent, accurate data from their both from their existing web analytics platform and from their CRM. And you really need to have good data set to plug in to sort of train upon. And obviously we had these interesting anomalies of lockdown and the stamp duty holiday, which added a different angle to the mix. So so they provided that data, and within a very short space of time, I think within 3 days, I think it was, we were able to help them put together a board pack and a business case that modeled the uplift. It showed them it was something like a 260% return on investment, so they could absolutely cover the cost of the extra investment into the Adobe Analytics platform and the implementation. They could easily cover that in year one, or if they accrued it out over sort of the 3-year commit of the license, it's a really sound investment for them, and it also gives them a platform to increase their maturity around optimization of the customer journey on the site. Maybe start looking into more personalization, help testing product development, how they sort of drive their business forward. So yeah, it was really exciting, and the forecasting was such a key part of getting that buy-in. And as I said, turning that around in 3 days with the sort of level of detail that we did wouldn't have been possible without Forecast Forge.
Great. Well, I'm very, very happy to hear that. So what metrics were you forecasting for them, or what were the important ones that they really liked to see?
Yeah, so I think for us, because we're looking at essentially buying more traffic from the paid media channels, we needed to look at their traffic. We needed to look back over a long enough period of time that we had a pretty accurate forecast out of what the traffic would look like. We also needed to take into account the potential of more lockdowns and the peaks and troughs, the surge in demand, the pent-up demand of lockdown, and then the surge in demand of the stamp duty relief would give. So we wanted to have those regressors built in, those additional lenses for them to view what might happen, to give them the confidence that, look, you might not have a typical year of seasonality that you've seen before, but actually, if we look at the demand over the entire year, there's still an awful lot there.
Yeah, so I think you've just answered my next question, which was going to be about sort of what regressors did you have to add to make a great forecast, and that was around the lockdowns, which are obviously very important for people moving house and whether they're allowed to view houses and things like that, and then also the stamp duty holiday. So you did some scenario planning about what if there are more lockdowns, or what if the stamp duty holiday is extended or not? Is that
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step was to get the traffic forecast. So we were looking at the sales data. They provided very granular data from their CRM, but the traffic forecast was the first piece. And once we were comfortable that we'd forecast out what that was going to look like, we made sure that we got their approval. And essentially, can you sign off this stage so we can move on to the next one? And the next stage was then to look at that, what that meant for sales and for revenue, and then to start modeling those different scenarios so that they could see that if we do have full national lockdown, regional pockets of lockdown, if we extend or shorten the stamp duty holiday, what does that do to the demand and how does that change? And then we looked at different timelines for implementation. So if they could, get this into an earlier sprint, so they could have the technology live sooner, what would that look like? So yeah, it was quite a collaborative process in that sort of day following that first pass of the forecasting, and just having that available in a shared spreadsheet. The ability for everybody involved to not just share a screen, but be in the sheet and be involved, and to add data in if they wanted to. And I think that was really important in sort of transparency and building up that kind of trust to make a decision in quite a short period of time.
And well, I mean, that all sounds totally amazing. We've covered a lot of ground. Like, I don't even need to ask the questions to to learn what I want to learn here. Was there anything that didn't work as well as you'd hoped, or things that didn't end up the way you'd expected?
No, I'd say, and we are planning to revisit this. I'd say that stepping down into a sort of channel forecast, so looking in more granularity around those kind of referral sources that made up that forecast, and looking at areas that we could potentially, forecast more improvement for. So, some of the initiatives that we would typically look to carry out using a better, more accurate web analytics data set would be, looking at optimizing, their content strategy. So there may be, failed searches, broken journeys. There may be clear signs of frustration that users aren't quite finding the information that they need on a particular journey, and we would look to surface that and feed that into the content teams, potentially the SEO teams, if there are people coming in on queries that aren't getting answered. We'd look to feed that into some testing for the paid channel to validate those hypotheses, and actually having a more granular view, because we rolled this all up in quite a short space of time. So we didn't seek to understand too much depth into the split between brand and non-brand referrals, and then the channels that those referrals were coming by. And then, of course, we would really like to look over the entire customer journey and see if they had any, if they had any cannibalization across their channels, and things that we could kind of pull out as little bright spots of opportunity within the forecast, and sort of tell a bit more of a complete narrative of the customer journey. But I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that it being a work in progress and a living forecast that we continue to work with them on, and they have a very capable team of paid media analysts and data specialists that are literate in Python and R, and all of these sort of programming languages that as they take it on, I think that they will start to bake the principles of the Forecast Forge approach into their own planning and modeling, and I think that's really interesting. And I think there's
it's just I mean,
there's
it's only been what were we talking sort of early November maybe? So it's only
yeah
been a few months, and this sort of development process, it does take some time.
yeah absolutely. So they obviously end of November, we completed this initial piece of work. They've progressed with this project. Christmas happened, everyone had a bit of time off, which was lovely. And now we've got our first release scheduled into a sprint. So by March they should be live. With both the technology they bought, but also between now and then, continue work on the forecast. So
Okay, great. So I'll follow up with you a few months after March to say
absolutely
how good was the forecast.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we took three tactical initiatives, not just the addition of the analytics data into the ad cloud modeling. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to come back and see if we have managed to exceed expectations of the forecast. We were deliberately sort of down weighting the uplift of the initiatives we were putting into the forecast, so that we can help the team exceed those forecasts, and hopefully report back into their wider business some great success. And they have other businesses as well. So if these initiatives work, it'll be a blueprint for them rolling it out. And I think that's really interesting. And I think one other area that is worth mentioning is that the tech vendor, Adobe in this case, this forecasting approach is way quicker than their normal sort of sales cycle with a customer. So they actually spotted it and have called it out as really interesting to their organization. And I've had a couple of conversations with some of their EMEA teams around this approach and how it could potentially work.
That's awesome.
And so you may find Adobe by asking for prices for an enterprise license soon.
Well, I'll definitely have to make sure if they need it urgently.
yeah, absolutely.
That's great, Ian. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that I should have asked you but I haven't, or anything else that you want to say that I haven't given you the chance to say yet?
No, I think one of the other things we have discussed that there's a really relevant point is that really moving and my consultancy team very much have the capability to build our own forecasts, to combine data and to manage that model ourselves. But once you've got a platform like Forecast Forge provides, that gives you much greater agility and much speed to modeling of a baseline forecast, but then also the scenarios and being able to apply regressors in a very easy and direct manner without needing to schedule some time of the chap who does the Python and make sure that you're using the resources in the business to complete it. So I think that there's definitely a spot for tools that just make life easier. And even if a team has the capability to produce their own forecast, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the best use of their time. So, for example, the chap at Really Moving, who's super keen on this, he spent his time building a coverage API integration into the ad cloud so that they can change their bids by the coverage that they have of postcode regions. A really, really powerful addition to their targeting.
I don't know if they've got a lot of conveyancers or whatever in a particular area, they can upweight those bids.
Indeed, or if they don't have any coverage somewhere like Highlands and Islands or Jersey, then they can they can save their wastage of bidding in areas that they can't cover. So he was able to complete a super valuable project to the business because we're providing the forecast with Forecast Forge, and it was all done, as I said, in less than 3 days with some backwards and forwards and not a lot of heavy lifting on our part. So I think that kind of ease of use is super important. And just that standout that just because you have the skills to do something doesn't mean that applying a tool that makes that easier isn't a good move. It is.
Wow, I'm so pleased to hear that, Ian. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm just looking at the two massive beards on my screen here and thinking
it's lockdown.
This should probably have been a conversation about real ale or something like that. Forecasting is much more fun. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.